record to the cloud, so everybody should see that. And great, I'm going to let Christopher take it away because we've got a full hour of stuff to learn about Folio and ReShare wise.
Sounds
All right.
good. Well, thanks so much, Sean. Good morning, everyone. We're thrilled to be here and be able to chat a little bit about the full solution that we'll be working on with you all over the next 2 years. My name is Christopher Holly. As Sean mentioned, I'm with EBSCO. My official title is Director of SaaS Innovation. And basically what that means is I work with the range of software as a service products that EBSCO works with, both EBSCO products as well as products like Folio that we engage in through a community. My own background has primarily been with ILS systems, LSP systems over the past 20 years or so, working with almost everyone out there. And I've been both in libraries and with various vendors over the years too. So my focus, my sort of what's developed into a passion has been these different kinds of systems and how they can support and work with libraries. So I'm excited to jump in and talk to you about what we're offering today. I've got a lot to cover over the next hour. I'm hoping to try and carve out a couple minutes at the end if there are any questions. I think Sean and Joy said they'd be monitoring the chat. So we can get to those. Anything you put in the chat, we can get to that toward the end of the session. So let me share my screen and we'll go through. I'm going to flip-flop between some presentation and some live stuff as well, really just to give you a taste of what to expect. So let me share my screen. And perfect. So you should be seeing a PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully that's up and rolling. And so without further ado, let's jump in. So philosophically, I just wanted to talk a little bit about where EBSCO's focus is on open. And I often joke that we hear open so much in this industry that it almost becomes kind of a throwaway word. But where I think it is important to bring it up and to specify how it's effective and how EBSCO is focusing on it is in a couple key areas. The last one, the open source, the software side of it is really what we're going to focus most on today. But I also want to mention that we do have a strong focus on open access. Also looking at open data and how we can work with and make data more portable and discoverable in different ways, as well as the infrastructure itself and building applications that are interoperable and can be plugged in and work in different ways. And I think that also speaks a lot to my role in software as a service. And as EBSCO is developing this whole segment of the company that's really focused on the service side. So in the case of working with things like open source software, a big piece of that is managing it and by providing the services around both the support, the implementation, as well as other things like ongoing development and et cetera, we're able to make open source more accessible so that you can work with us and really we can help provide you with that backbone to help the software run. So open really is a meaningful term here at EBSCO in how we're working with and looking at different elements and in particular the software side, which we'll look at today. So Folio as a system, how does this stand out? What makes it unique? Where does this take you into the future? And I think it's important to point out a couple key points about Folio. Is that libraries really have a choice with Folio in terms of how they want to run it, how they want to have it supported, and even the various vendors that they can potentially work with Folio. So what you're doing is choosing software and then also being able to choose who you work with on that software. So maybe EBSCO is doing a lot of the primary support around your Folio system. And over time, you want to add in other components and other things. and you'd have the ability to even work with other vendors to support those things, or maybe even take some of that support in-house over time. But you really then have a lot more flexibility for that software to grow and adapt with you all as an organization and as different institutions over time. One other thing that's unique with Folio too is that it's truly API first. Folio is using its own APIs to run all of the functions. In fact, there are more APIs than there are apps for those APIs at this point, which really shows how those APIs can be utilized in different ways, not only for the Folio apps, but you all have access to those to be able to adapt and connect and work with third-party systems as well. And so that API first development is a real key cornerstone to the Folio setup. Well, I'm going to go live and show a couple of things within Folio a little bit later in the presentation, but one of the key elements that I find pretty compelling about Folio is that it's not monolithic. It's truly a platform that's using smaller apps. And we often have used the analogy within the Folio community of Folio as kind of a smartphone where you're picking which apps you want on your home screen and how you're going to access those and work with different ones. And so we'll take a look at that. And sometimes it can seem a little overwhelming at first because you're like, oh, wow, there are all these different apps. But when it comes down to your functions, those apps, you'll only see the ones that you need to work with. You will only see the functions within the apps that you need to work with. And the apps are all interconnected. So similarly to your smartphone, when you pull up somebody's address in your contacts list and click on it, it opens up the mapping app of your choice. Folio also is interconnected in similar ways, and we'll take a look at some of that too. But it really does help with the quick rollout because you're only seeing the functions and features that you personally need to work with. So from a training standpoint, we've found in talking with various libraries who are now live and working with Folio that the rollout has been very streamlined for a lot of their line staff because it's very clear what functions and features they need to click on and use. The other advantage with Folio is really the community of peers within the Folio and the Open Library Foundation community. The Open Library Foundation, or OLF, is the larger entity that governs over Folio. But what you get with that are all the other institutions that are part of Folio, whether they're just using Folio as kind of an end user, or whether they're more actively involved in the Folio project as a developer or as a subject matter expert providing feedback and ideas into the development of the system. So it's a very strong collective group, and I'll talk more about that as we continue. Some other things to note with Folio is that each release is named after flowers. They're in alphabetical order, which makes it easy to keep track of where we are. There are about 3 releases per year right now, and currently the Orchid release is the most current release. You can see all the other little stickers and badges there. So it's kind of fun to play along with that. We've got stickers of those things at conferences and stuff if you want to keep track of those or put them on your laptop or things like that. But I always like to just point out that we've got these, that this is the naming convention because it helps you keep track of where we are in the cycle of things. This slide is not meant to be comprehensive. It's really just to give you a sense of various libraries that are using Folio with EBSCO services. And so this is a overview slide of those institutions. I put Galileo there in the middle now that we're working with you all. I'm certainly excited to be working with you. I think you as an organization bring a lot to this project. And what I think is very nice with Galileo is you as an organization represent the range of libraries. And I think that's what this slide really points to is the range of libraries, from smaller libraries that are just using Folio for cataloging and circulation to libraries like Michigan State and Cornell that are using all the elements of the system, from e-resource management to acquisitions to cataloging to circulation, et cetera. You're not alone as a consortium. The Mobius Consortium in Missouri is also a large-scale institution of, I think it's 61 libraries that are coming together into a single Folio system, and they'll also be expanding to 80 or so libraries that are part of the larger ReShare system, some of them not even using Folio to interact with all the other Folio libraries. So it really is expansive, the range of libraries that are using Folio. And I think that really speaks to the adaptability of the system for libraries large and small to be able to work with it. So I thought I'd throw in some quotes. I think it's always nice to hear what some different institutions that are working with Folio, and in this case, EBSCO's supported version of Folio, have to say about that. Five Colleges Consortium was one of the early adopters of Folio. They worked alongside EBSCO for their implementation process and then ongoing support of the system. And I'm not going to read you these quotes, but I think some of the key points here are just general openness and really aligning with their own values and mission of providing, again, that term open, with regard to research and discovery and really helping to drive things into the future. And they, of course, were the initial consortia working with this. So I think it's important to note that Folio has had consortia in mind from the very beginning. Mobius, they're in the implementation process right now. They're planning to go live in March of 2024, so in less than a year from now. And Donna Bacon, the executive director there, again, she talks about, again, the community and what that brings together and being able to contribute their projects and help to share that with the larger community of libraries, both from the standpoint of Folio and Project ReShare, and just that coming together, that community, that communal sense that we have as librarians to be able to work together, I think really speaks to that. And I think with you all coming on board, that also helps contribute to that larger collective goal. I think it's also important to point out a couple libraries that are more at the sort of statewide / countrywide level. And Library of Congress is one that you may or may not have heard that EBSCO is now working with to support Folio. And I think what's significant here with Library of Congress is that they're also working with us on different development aspects around BibFrame and linked data and really helping to push these systems into the future. And so I think there's some really exciting things that we're working on with Library of Congress that will help drive Folio into the future and really work with different elements for not only them as an institution, but just the greater community in general. Along with that, I'll be talking about Bibliograph, which is actually a product that's included in your package, and that we can figure out when that's going to be in the implementation cycle, but we can actually do that sooner than your actual go live with Folio. So that's something to think about, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation, and Bibliograph basically involves BibFrame, linked data, and we'll talk more about that. And then I also have National Library of Australia, another national type library that just illustrates that large comprehensive nature of Folio support and what it can do. So as far as the community goes, I wanted to point out a couple things in case any of this is of interest to you. EBSCO has a users group. So any libraries that are working with EBSCO products or interested in working with EBSCO products are certainly welcome to come. The next one is in Cincinnati, Ohio in a couple weeks in early June. You can still register to come. There is a day dedicated to libraries either migrating to, already live with, or interested in Folio. And then we also have some other tracks on the other days looking at some of our other software as a service products like EDS, et cetera. EDS being EBSCO Discovery Service. I think a lot of you are familiar with that, but just wanted to make sure I define that. And then the Open Library Foundation that I mentioned is the overarching institution that oversees, or organization that oversees the Folio project. And their next meeting will be in Chicago, August 22nd to 24th. So that can also be a really nice time to come together, not only with other EBSCO Folio users, but also libraries that might be supporting Folio themselves or working with Folio in some other way with a different provider. So that's another great opportunity to get involved and see what's going on with the project. So what I wanted to do next was talk just a little bit about the implementation process. We still are in kind of a pre-implementation planning cycle with the Galileo team. So I don't have a lot of specifics to give you yet, but I wanted to give you just kind of a general sense of the different concepts, the different teams at EBSCO that we're working with as we developed the rollout plan for your Folio system and related products for the Galileo EBSCO solution. So first, we really are building on the relationship that we've established with you for projects like EDS and Open Athens. And I think it's great that we have those strong communication channels developed already, because it allows us to tap into those and just build and grow upon them even further. EDS and Open Athens are certainly really nice complementary products to Folio. And so having those in place already at most of your institutions, I think really helps streamline the whole implementation process. And that'll be certainly something that we'll do along the way with the implementation, is just doing basically like health checks, making sure that those are where they need to be for the Folio implementation. We do have an established comprehensive set of services, and I'm going to talk about the different teams. I think it's in the next slide, really to help ensure that long-term success, not only with the project itself and the implementation, but then the ongoing support and the maintenance of the system. And we'll obviously be working very closely with the Galileo systems teams to make sure a lot of those different services and support channels are all in alignment. And as I mentioned, we do have multiple teams at EBSCO working on these different components, which is really a nice thing. We've got a coordinator at the top, but then we've got specialists in all these different areas who are going to really help make sure that everything comes to fruition and it's a successful implementation. So this next slide illustrates just the gamut and range of different teams and different people that you'll be working with over the course of the next couple of years, not only for the implementation, but then beyond that for the ongoing support. I just need to move some Zoom stuff out of the way to see the full slide. There we go. So the library services engineers, or LSEs, and you might be familiar with some of them already. Kate Hill, I know, has done a lot of work with some of the libraries in Georgia. She's an LSE. They do work with the EDS system as well as other products like Folio, and they really provide that boots on the ground focus and can really get their hands dirty with you and dig in and help with configurations and setup. So for any of you who have worked with an LSE, I'm sure you know the value that they bring and that practical knowledge. They've been librarians, they've been in your shoes, so they know how to work with the different nuances and things that may arise. The implementation consultants are actually focused on the Folio system itself. And what's nice about the implementation consulting team is they've also all been librarians. Many of them have gone through migrations themselves. Some of them even to Folio, and loved the process so much they wanted to come to EBSCO and continue working with these kinds of projects. But what they provide is that consulting, and I think that really speaks to our implementation process as a whole, where we're really digging into your existing workflows, helping you map those into Folio workflows, and really thinking about what makes the most sense in each of your situations. And so that team brings a lot of skill into that process. The IPMs, or implementation project managers, are focused on the complementary EBSCO products that work along with Folio, like EDS, like Panorama, etc. And that team, and you've probably worked with some of them already, really provide just a real nice systematic approach to make sure things are interconnected, rolled out, connected accordingly. We have an internal team called the ABC team, self-named. They're always coding, but their main focus is to help develop tools to streamline different activities, whether it's things around implementation or other kinds of interconnective tools. And so it's nice to know that we've got this team that's solely focused on coding and that technical expertise to helps you not only with the implementation process, but also with other streamlining of products and projects going forward. There's a whole training specialist team, and they've been doing a lot of work, not only creating online training and different videos. They do live training for EBSCO Folio institutions on each rollout, talking through some of those things and providing real-time feedback and Q&A to talk through what's new and new features and functions in the system. They'll also be providing you all with the train the trainer type training throughout your implementation project. Once you're live, we have a whole focus support team that is actually focused on the Folio project. So that helps triage and focus the different questions and things that are coming in. And then finally, I alluded to this earlier, but we have a program management team. And I think this is a real hallmark to our setup because you've got all these different teams, all these different projects, all these different libraries in your consortium working on and pulling together the migration of system. And we have a program manager assigned to that from EBSCO who makes sure everything is moving along, everyone's talking to each other, keeps an eye out for the dependencies between different products and different teams, and really helps things just continue on in a really nice track. I've been really appreciative of the fact that we have this type of role in place, especially for larger libraries and for consortia as they go live, because it really makes for a much easier coordination, helps to identify any issues, questions, concerns along the way so that they can be more effectively handled. So one thing I want to mention, and I mentioned this earlier with the training team, is that they're creating a bunch of different paths of training and different videos and overviews and things. And so EBSCO Connect is where those live. And within EBSCO Academy, there's a whole Folio track. So that's something that we'll be working with the Galileo central office on making sure that that's set up so that each individual institution has access to these and can easily connect and see those. So that's something to keep an eye out for that we'll be working with them on over the next month or so to make sure that we can get those rolled out for you appropriately. In addition to that, we use Monday.com as our planning software and our project software. Some of you might be familiar with that already. One thing that I really like about Monday.com is that it allows us to set up tracks at the project level, at the consortial level, and then at each institution level. So it's going to be easy for us to be able to see who's responsible for what, where dependencies are, what might be happening at specific institutions that's unique versus what needs to happen across the project as a whole. And these dashboards really help with balance, planning, and execution, as you can see on the left. So I'll leave it at that. We'll definitely be covering Monday in more detail with you all, doing some training on it, making sure you know how to access the pieces that you need. But we've been finding this to be an extremely helpful tool for any development that we're doing. We can also see how that aligns in timing-wise with different elements and different dependencies within the implementation project itself. And so it's just been a very robust and helpful tool for us to work together with you all to roll out the implementations. So this next slide, I just wanted to illustrate what all is within this package. As a reminder, you already have contracts around EDS and Open Athens. So I did not mention those here because those are separate and you already have them. But what's part of this particular package is the migration services and then the ongoing support services and the hosting services around the Folio software. And here I've mentioned a lot of the key apps that are currently part of the software, but obviously over time, new apps will be added. Some of these apps might change names or split into other apps. Changes may happen with that, but the key is that the core functionality is there, spanning the gamut from public services to tech services, et cetera. EBSCO then has additional products that complement the Folio software, and these are also included in your package. The Gobi and EBSCOnet integration is part of that, and what we've also included is specialized pricing around Gobi. So if you are interested in working with Gobi in more than you do now, or revamping some of your own services around Gobi, we do have some special packages and pricing to consider with that. EBSCO's Panorama Full, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, and we have a presentation on that that Rob's going to be doing, Rob from our Panorama team, for your conference. And so we're going to talk in more detail about the types of reports and analytics that are available in Panorama. Panorama is a reporting and analytics tool, and I'll leave that at that for now. We have a usage loading and consolidation service where we can set up automated usage of counter data and pull that into the and other e-resource data and pull that into Folio. And it's a nice service where we basically are doing kind of a white glove loading service and tying into Sushi elements to really speed up a lot of that work for you all. The A to Z Mark updates provides automated records for your online content. And then Bibliograph, I'll talk in more detail about that, but I already mentioned how that includes basically your linked data elements. And then Locate, which is actually the EBSCO Folio OPAC, is a quick, easy way to put that. So you'll have an additional user interface to consider with Folio and how you want to roll that out in addition to EDS. And I actually have a slide next that compares Locate with EDS just to make sure you have a clear sense of what those are. So in summary, you've got the Folio software as well as a package of complementary tools from EBSCO that are part of this package. So this next slide really delineates Locate and EBSCO Discovery Service. So what's the difference? Why use one over the other? I think the quick way to really think about them is Locate is your OPAC. It's solely focused on your Folio catalog records, whereas EDS is providing that more broad discovery type experience. And so it's going to be your catalog plus databases, plus you might have digital asset management systems that you're pulling in and other kinds of systems as well. So EDS is providing that broader central indexed search experience, whereas Locate is really just that specific search interface tool just for your Folio records. So hopefully that helps delineate it there in a short way, but I provided some other bullet points here just for consideration. With Locate, it is real-time integration with Folio. So as records are loaded into and added into and updated and changed within Folio, Locate is talking to Folio in real time. The difference with EDS is discovery. It's using OAI PMH to connect back with Folio. And so it's doing the loads back and forth with Folio of those records as frequently as that OAI PMH cycle is set up to be. Now that said, there are still real-time availability checking and lookups. The OAI PMH would simply be providing in new records and or actual changes to records in those updates. Locate and EDS both cover course reserves, but they do it in slightly different ways. Locate is also a little bit more of that, what I think of as like a local database type searching. So we can set up more specific browse and keyword search elements within it versus Discovery, which is trying to be a little bit more broad in its keyword searching capabilities. So that's one other distinction. Patron empowerment is available in both. Local branding is available in both. So just to give you a quick sense of that, let me just jump over real quick. I loaded up Grand Valley State University. They are live with Folio. They have EDS on top of Folio. They are EBSCO supported Folio. And they have been one of our key beta libraries in working with the Locate software and setting it up. So here's a great example of an institution utilizing Locate. And so as an OPAC, it has your search box here. You can choose what index as well as an advanced search. There's also browse search capabilities that are continuing to grow over time. This is just the first iteration of Folio, or sorry, of Locate. And there is a specialized course reserve search. I can do a specific search by like a key term like writing, or I can even do browse by department, instructor, etc. I can also do a keyword search here of my instructor, department, course name. But here I can see this brought up 2 writing courses. I can click into those to see more detail about the items that are part of those. Obviously, if I were just to do a search via the title, those would pop up in my results in general, but this gives you a nice consolidated page that's just focused on that specific course. So those are some of the different means of searching your course reserves. There's also a call number browse search as well. As I mentioned, it does tie in with your My Account features, as does EDS. And so I can get into a My Bookshelf and do renewals and requests and things similarly as I'd be able to do within Folio, or sorry, with EDS on top of Folio. And then down over here on the left, I've got various facets and things I can search by. If let me just do a quick search, if I spell it correctly. And then here we can see some titles pop in, place a hold. I can see the availability, and just gives you a sense of that general look and feel of this OPAC experience. So again, I just wanted to give you some highlights there, just to give you a sense of what Locate is all about. And hopefully this slide helps distinguish about when you might use Locate versus EDS, etc. So continuing along, what I also wanted to do is just pop into the Folio software in case some of you have not seen it or haven't seen it recently, just to point out a couple key concepts with it, just give you a sense of the look and feel. I'm not planning to do any kind of real deep demos here. This is just meant to be just a brief overview of Folio. So let me just do to another tab. And oops. Sorry, I'm trying to get the Zoom stuff out of the way. There we go. Okay, so here we are at the Folio login screen. Folio is web-based, and you can tie Folio into local SSO. It can be tied into Open Athens, so we can link it in that way for your staff logins. It just depends on how you want to set that up. It can be configured in either way. Here I have a full-scale login. I call it kind of the super user login that has access to everything. But let me just log in as somebody else real quick who does not have access to everything. I'm going to log in here as Donna. Donna is a circulation librarian. When Donna logs into the system, she only sees the circulation related apps. So here, welcome to Folio. We've got various apps available at the top of the screen, and you can see that they're listed here in alphabetical order. Everything from check-in, check-out, course reserves, to inventory, which is where a lot of the cataloging is done, to managing requests, hold requests, recalls, those kinds of things based on the policies that you've set up. The user file, which is obviously where I'd be working with any of my patron accounts, and then the settings area, which is where, based on my permissions, I can see and work with different setup aspects. So as the circulation manager, Donna does have access to a couple things. She can set up and edit and work with circ rules. She can work with some of the different course reserves setup areas, as well as get into some of the elements of the inventory app to work with different status codes and some of the different formats and things that might be needed in those drop downs. So again, that's all based on her permissions and what is appropriate for that institution. Your CERC manager may or may not have access to similar settings or similar apps. It really just depends on each institution. But this just gives you a taste of how an interface can look and feel and work with a particular user. So I'm going to log out now and log back in as Tim. Tim is our e-resources librarian. So when Tim logs into the system, he sees, as you can see, a completely different set of apps. So he sees the agreements app, dashboard app, e-holdings, licenses, organizations. And then when Tim goes into settings, he sees a whole different set of things than Donna saw. He's primarily working with some of the settings that are related to e-resource management. And at your institution, maybe you're much larger and have a lot more delineation of labor. Maybe your e-resources person wouldn't even see any of these settings. But I just want to point out that it is possible to provide different users, staff users at your library with different permissions in the settings area, which can help delineate some of that labor if appropriate. And one of the things that will also be set up in your situation as a consortium is that there can be settings that can be handled at the consortial level and trickle into the institutions themselves, or just at the institution level, depending on permissions and how you choose to set those up. So hopefully that gives you just a quick taste of just the look and the feel, how that can adapt to the end user, that whole smartphone analogy that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to log in now as our Folio user, just to look at things in general. And so a couple of things I just thought I'd quickly point out. One is just the interoperability between the different apps. And so if I go into our the inventory app, which is where I can work with and search and edit, depending on my permissions, what we call instance records, which is the bibliographic level, holdings and item records. Here I can just do a quick search for Jabberland, which is one of my favorite records as an Alice in Wonderland fan. But here you can see different holdings for that record. Each holdings may have one or more item records associated with it. And if there are items there, you can see that status, you'll see the clipboard. So you can easily see the hierarchy, and this clipboard allows me to copy and paste that barcode to use it for other reasons. But here I get a nice overview of the instance, holding and item levels. I can scroll down and see other details there. But what I want to point out is I might have some links. And so here I can also see links to other records, like not only the holdings and item, but I can also link into the order record. And so here I can click on the POL, and just by clicking on that purchase order line number in the cataloging record, it automatically opened up the orders app for me, taking me directly to that order record. So at one click, even though I'm bouncing between different apps, it's actually opening these records up easily for me. Because you can have multiple sessions of Folio open at the same time. Maybe I'd right click and open that in a new browser and a new tab, or have multiple records open and arrange them on my screen utilizing just standard browser tools. To do that, I can easily see and cascade and work with multiple records at the same time, which is nice. But really what I wanted to illustrate here is just that interconnectivity, so I can click and work between records. But now that I'm in the order record, I can click and get back to the title record. I can scroll down and there's a link here to get into the fund. So if I wanted to see any kind of the fund details, et cetera, I can click on that link to get into the finance app, et cetera. So everything's very much interconnected, even though you're working with specific workflows and specific records in different apps. So that's one concept I wanted to mention. Another one I just wanted to briefly mention, just for any e-resource fans out there, is just a little terminology distinction, and that's agreements versus licenses, because you'll notice there's an agreements app and there's also something called the licenses app. So the agreement is really the larger scale e-resource management record. So if I go in one of these, they're typically going to be at a vendor level, and you might have multiple agreement records per vendor. If, let's say, you've got more than one contract per vendor, and maybe you have a consortial one, maybe you have a local library one or something like that. We set up a couple different ones here for EBSCO, but obviously any vendor can be set up here with agreement records. But here we've got a consortial one, for example. And what I like about these agreement records for e-resource management and Folio is they give you a really nice overview screen. So here I can easily get to internal contacts, agreement lines, which is essentially the database names, e-resource titles, et cetera, that are a part of this. I can get in and access the controlling license. And so these license or think of these as contracts are set up in what's called the licenses app, but I can link back to that license app really easily. The agreement record is really just giving me the roll up of everything I might need to know about that e-resource. So you can see just scanning this list, the variety of things from license and business terms to other supplemental documents, usage stats, et cetera, that all come together with the agreement app. Let's see here. So that's really what I wanted to cover in terms of just giving you a taste of Folio. You'll obviously be diving much more deeply into all of these apps, all of these different functions, but just wanted to illustrate just some of the general concepts and just give you a sense of what it looks like. So I'm going to log out there. I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint and just continue on with a couple other things. So Panorama, I know we're going to do a whole separate session on that. So I don't want to steal Rob's thunder, but I just wanted to just briefly mention some of the key things with Panorama. Panorama is designed as really a resource agnostic analytics tool. So what I mean by agnostic is that it can actually work with different ILS systems. So we can pull in your historical ALMA data, for example. We can then work with ongoing Folio data with that. We have libraries using Sierra and other ILSs who are working with Panorama. So it really is agnostic in terms of the type of ILS data that it can work with. But Panorama is also more expansive as well, that it can work with other types of data. So you might have other systems at your library, like maybe SpringShare data, maybe gate count data, maybe ILL data. You might have campus system data that you want to incorporate into Panorama. And that's where Panorama can really be a nice consolidation tool to pull together all sorts of disparate data sets and provide comprehensive analytics and reports around that. And so Panorama, let me just jump into the interface real quick with you, is actually based on, let's see, don't need that open. So Panorama is actually based on Tableau. So if any of you are familiar with Tableau, that's the core software that is behind Panorama. Where EBSCO has taken it another step beyond that is that we've created a lot of default dashboards and reports, as you can see here on this screen. We've also tailored the different data pipes or source pipes of data that come into Panorama and done so in a streamlined way. We try to do that with automated processes and APIs as much as possible. Where not, we'll set those up as an FTP upload, that kind of thing. But Panorama really does provide a whole range of different types of reports. We've made sure in your package to include the data sources that are needed per library to create things like our ACRL reporting. And here you can see I can click on this. This is pulling data from disparate sources to call together an ACRL report. You've got different tools within Panorama itself to be able to save, schedule, even edit and create your own reports. And then once you've created a report, you'll see here I can go in and filter by things like fiscal year, campus name, etc. While Panorama's, I think, magic is in the calling together and pulling together of disparate data, it also helps further enhance just standard ILS reports. So you can see here that we've got different circulation type reports, collection budget reporting, cost effectiveness reporting, looking at E versus print, course reserve reports, discovery type reports, etc. So it really does span the gamut. I'll let Rob cover a lot of this in much more detail with you, but just wanted to give you a taste of what that's all about. So jumping back here into the presentation, I love this slide, and I'm sure Rob will probably cover this with you, but I think it's important to mention for those of you who don't attend the Panorama session, is one of the key pieces of value that Panorama brings is that it saves you time. It saves you the time of having to manipulate and load the data, which can often be extremely time consuming. And we've looked at different stats of staff time and usage to actually create and run comprehensive reports. And so if we're able to save you that harvesting and data manipulation time and really just pull in that data, call it together in a way that helps you analyze it, notice you're going to get a lot more time to do the juicy stuff, to really dig into the reports, to see how you can analyze and work with that data in different ways. And so this is really, I think, the big advantage of Panorama is you're not wasting your time with a lot of just the mechanical processes. You're really able to put your mind to work and see, okay, now that we've got this data, how are we going to analyze it? What's a good way to display it, work with it, pull it together in different ways. So a huge advantage of the Panorama system. And so with that, I'm going to end by talking a little bit about Bibliograph. And then from there, we should have a couple minutes to look at some questions. I can see there is some chat, so we'll get into anything that might have popped up in the chat over the course of the hour. But let's talk a little bit about Bibliograph. This is also included in your package. And what is Bibliograph all about? So Bibliograph is an EBSCO product. And what problem is it trying to solve here? A key problem for libraries is that the catalogs aren't portable or visible. That data, the MARC data, or which is mostly how catalog records are stored, but it could be in other formats as well, is pretty much locked down within these systems. It becomes invisible at a broader search level, and none of that data is easily connected with other systems just broadly out there beyond the system that it's stored in. So how could we take advantage of different vocabularies, different systems that are out there beyond library systems even, that might give elaboration into examples like people, places, genres, etc. And so with Bibliograph, we're really able to free that data, as we see here in the second point, and then also connect it with data from other authoritative sources to help enrich that data and to help users find some of these records and some of these sources from anywhere on the web that they might be. So we're doing this by transforming your MARC data into BibFrame, and you don't need to do anything to do that. Our processes will do that for you. And so we're really able to take advantage of the BibFrame format as a standard and be able to create these connections and create these enrichments, etc. And so this is all something that's available now. We are doing further embellishment and further development, and that's what a lot of the linked data work that we're doing at Library of Congress plays into. But I just wanted to talk about what we can do now with Bibliograph. So as I said, these services are available today. So you don't have to wait until you're live with Folio, et cetera, to get this going. And really the main purpose of Bibliograph is to transform your MARC data into BibFrame, and then from there provide you with some different tools. And we'll take a look at some of these different tools and things that you can use. Things like creating and curating different kinds of collections, creating living lists of items in different ways that can even be published and exposed online, enriching your sources with other authoritative data sources, and I'll have some examples there to look at that. And then in general, just drive more usage to your library catalog. So how does this work? So the first step in this is that we would transform your MARC data into BibFrame. It's just a matter of getting us the MARC data files, and from there we would then work with that data to transform it into BibFrame, and then each resource, as you can see at the bottom of the slide, becomes a link that serves as a unique identifier. And so that's really what's established here. And then what we can do further is then parse this out so that we can connect all of those different elements in the record, whether it was the creator, the author, titles, other kinds of things. We can connect those to other authoritative data sources to see what other titles, what other descriptive elements might be associated, and provide additional detail within those records. And so that's really what this slide is trying to show, is how we can link together all of those different data elements. So once we've turned it into BibFrame, once we've enriched that data, what can we do with it? We can show off rich connections anywhere. So I mentioned this sense of publishing sets of lists and things. So these could be different segments of your website that we add these to. We call these knowledge panels. And so they really provide a visual context and provide new paths into your catalog and other resources by providing you with just different ways of exposing and distributing that data. And so here we can see a nice example of that with the European Parliament Library using BibFrame. In their case, they happen to be also using Primo and LibGuides, but you can be using a variety of different systems. I think that's the beauty here, is BibFrame is ubiquitous that way. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Folio or not, or EDS or not. So that's why we can get this and do this as an earlier step in your implementation project. The other element that some of you might be aware of already is Google's knowledge graph. And so you might have done searches already within Google and seen that title show up in the knowledge graph pane and show you where you might be able to buy that on Amazon or other places, or borrow it at a library near you. And so this is what can really help expose your collections on the general web, so that people can see, oh, that this institution does have that particular title. The other thing that I think is really nice is once we've loaded various collections into BibFrame, we can actually use the open platform as a means to look at where overlap might be within collections, kind of do collection comparisons between different institutions, see how your collection compares with another, but also maybe you're looking at even how your collection compares within a certain subject area or something like that within your library versus another library. So just a quick overview on Bibliograph. Like I said, just want to give you a taste of these things, but just to summarize, Bibliograph really gives you a chance to unlock your data, expose your data, enrich your data, and then publish it and display it, and also do comparisons of your data in all sorts of different ways. So very cool tool to dive more deeply into throughout the course of the project. So with that said, it looks like we have about 5 minutes left. So let me pause here. Sean and Joy, I think you said you were going to be keeping track of the Q&A. So feel free to chime in. Let me know if there's anything specific I can address in the next couple minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a few. I'm sorry, I'm just backing up a bit. So Melissa asks, does a folio play well with, excuse me, sorry, Tapasa or Iliad software from OCLC?
Yeah, so Folio is set up with NCIP compliance, and we do have libraries who have set up that integration using NCIP with systems like Tapasa and Iliad to do that communication back and forth for things like creating the brief record or doing sending the request in. So yeah, that's all done via NCIP.
And then also, do the license and business terms include ILL permissions for a database, or is it under something else?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me actually, I could pull that up for you. So let me log in and just to illustrate what it is I'm actually talking about here. So I think what we're referring to here, we're in the agreements area for an e-resource. And I'll just pull up that EBSCO consortial example that I had looked at earlier just for consistency's sake. And what you have here, as I mentioned before, is a nice summary of the various things, one of those being the license of business terms. So these are all set up in the licenses app. You can choose which ones you're going to set up and use and which ones you aren't. But yes, there are, I think the question was ILL terms, is that right?
Yep, that was it.
Yep. Yeah. And so, yeah, you do various ILL terms. You're only going to see the ones that have been set up, but you can choose to make them either public or internal. Any of the ones that are public can have a public note associated with it as well. And those details will actually show up in Discovery. So that's a great way to expose that information to your end users. And then all of that is set up then in the licenses app itself. So let me just pull that up really quick, just to pull up actually I could, well, I can pull up any license, it doesn't really matter. But if I go in here and go into edit, what you'll see here, if I scroll down into the terms, is that I can then select, and I can even add to that list. You can see people putting things in different languages. But yeah, so we can see things around print ILL, other elements of ILL and usage. So you can decide what terms you want to put in there and add to the exposed terms. Great. Other questions?
And then, sorry, finally, I think, so does the interconnectivity between records, for example, inventory and acquisitions, exist regardless of individual permissions? So is everyone able to see what's going on, even if it's view only?
Oh, that's a good question. So, the interconnectivity is always going to be there, yes. Your permissions are going to dictate whether or not you can see records or edit records or delete or work with other elements of the records. So if you do want people to be able to view those records in a certain app, then you're going to want to give them view permissions in that app. So for example, let's say I can edit and work with the instance records or the bibliographic records, item and holdings records, but I only need to see the order records and not actually view them. Then I just need to make sure that I have view permissions within the order record, but the connections are always going to exist. You need to have the view permissions in order to see them in the other app. Any other questions we can address in the next minute? Otherwise, happy to, we'll certainly be working closely with you over the next couple of years to get things rolled out. So I know our teams will be happy to address more over time.
I think Shelley was asking real quick if we could see an instance record, what it looks like in Folio.
Yeah, sure. Let me pop that back up again. Inventory. So again, all of your cataloging is done in the inventory app. I'll pull up my favorite record again. So to talk through the structure, so first I did a search. I can see results here in the middle. I gave an exact title match, so it brought this up on the left. Notice I can move the panes around to more deeply dig into and look at a specific record, but it defaults to the instance record view. And so here I can scroll down and see all the different fields that have been filled out, or in this case, not filled out for this particular record. And so that might be in as much or as little detail as you might need. If I want to edit and work with the instance level, I can click Edit Instance, and it's going to take me into that instance record to work with it. And so this is a record template that was worked on very closely with our metadata special interest group. When the special interest groups are the SIGs, they're within the Folio community, and basically they're the subject matter experts looking at these things. Now, interestingly, you'll see a lot of this is grayed out and I can't edit it. And the reason is I might have a source MARC record that actually is populating an instance record. And so that's something we'll certainly go into more detail with you on. But if you're working with any kind of instance record that's based on MARC, I would actually do my editing at the mark level. And so I actually go into edit mark bib record, and this is where I get my standard mark form and mark template to do all of my editing. So I think it's important to note that if you are working with instance records that have a mark as the source record, you do your editing in the mark record, and you'd be really using the instance record primarily as a view only version. That's kind of the quick and dirty in 1 minute, but we can certainly spend more time with you during the training process and implementation process on these record structures and editing and how all that works. All right, John, should we, we're at the top of the hour. Is there anything else that I answer, or should we?
I think we're at time, and we're gonna break for lunch. So Christopher, thank you so much for walking us through all of this, and we appreciate it, and we'll hopefully see you again very soon.
Yeah, thanks for your time. It's nice to meet you all virtually, and looking forward to working with you. Thanks again. Take care.
All right, thanks everybody.